Good evening and welcome to another edition of Conservative Corner. I'm your host, Tom Mountain, and we are a monthly talk show based in Newton, specifically at New TV, and we deal mostly with issues that perhaps in this very liberal state, this very liberal city, that others won't necessarily touch on and talk about, given the, shall we say, the Democrat tendencies of both the state and the city. And we like to think that we are the alternative viewpoint of people in and around Newton and in the Commonwealth as well. I am the state committee man for this district, which includes Newton, Wellesley, and Brookline. And I'm very glad to be hosting tonight my dear friend, Republican Jewish activist, Alan Decter. Alan, thank you for being here, Alan.
Thank you.
And Alan and I have been, shall we say, in the Republican trenches for a very long time. And Alan is a lifelong Newton resident, a graduate of the old Newton High School, and he has been a loyal Republican for many, many years. And wherever there is a Republican event of note to be found in and around Newton, and I would say Boston, Alan is there. Alan is a quiet, behind-the-scenes doer, and he's very effective at what he does. He's one of these unsung heroes that we don't hear much about, but he deserves all the credit in the world, especially for yesterday, which we had a wonderful Republican booth at the Newton Harvest Fair. And it really was wonderful to be there, and I mean that. And people will often say to us, well, how can you have such a Republican presence in Newton? We make sure that people know that we're here, especially in the Harvest Fair, by our booth. Where our booth is, it's right at the center of the Harvest Fair, so if you're walking, shall we say, 200 feet away, you look down, you can see our booth with its gaudy signs. And by gaudy, I mean that in a good way. Yesterday, we had signs from all the major candidates. Signs are from Trump, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tim Scott, DeSantis from Florida. The list goes on and on. We even had information from Perry Johnson, who's running for president, and Mr. Brinkley. I believe his first name is Alan, but I'm not entirely sure. But nevertheless, we highlighted all of our Republican candidates, and we had a lot of signs, a lot of paraphernalia, a lot of bumper stickers to give out. Now, interestingly enough, the ones that we gave out the most were anything to do with Trump. We gave up most of our Trump material, and that is everything from lawn signs, hats, bumper stickers, you name it. It was all Trump all the time. The second was from Nikki Haley. We gave out most, if not all, of her campaign material as well. To my surprise, we had a ton of material for Vivek. Nobody seemed to want them. I don't get it. We had about 60 signs for him, and I think we finished with 57 that we had to take home. I'm a big fan of Vivek. I don't necessarily support him for president, but again, I was surprised that the response for him and towards him was not really, shall we say, there in Newton, and from what I understand, it's not really happening in New Hampshire. But we'd like to thank dear friends, Newton Republican members, Chris Steffens and his mother, Heather Viveros, for getting all the material from New Hampshire, because that's where all the candidates are. They brought all the material in, and we were there all day. We had a very lively time. We had people confront us, not in an obnoxious way. Everyone was very civil and kind. And it was a big social event, and we look forward to it every year. And now with the bad weather coming in, we're going to be moving indoors, but still, we're going to be campaigning for our Republican candidates. So I just wanted to mention that at the outset, that your Republican Party in and around Newton is very active and vibrant, and we're moving forward. The issue at hand is a very sensitive, touchy issue to Newton, to the Commonwealth, and to the United States in general. And that is the issue with the Hamas terrorist war against Israel. In addition to my role as state committee man, I wear the hat of the vice chair of the Massachusetts Republican Jewish Committee. And we more or less focus on issues pertaining to Israel and America's role towards vis-a-vis Israel and what it should and shouldn't be. And Alan, you and I were at the pro-Israel rally sponsored by the CJP, Combined Jewish Philanthropies, and the Jewish Community Relations Council last week in Boston. And it was a huge rally of up to between 5 and 10,000 people. And what was your take from that rally? What did you notice from the speakers there?
Well, that Ed Markey, he got booed
Yes,
for
he
what
did.
he said.
And he deserved to.
Yes.
What did he say again?
From where I was standing, I wasn't sure if it was him speaking or I didn't have my glasses on. We have to tone down the
He was basically calling for a de-escalation of the war.
Yes, he did.
For
Yes.
which he was roundly booed.
Yes.
And Elizabeth Warren was there as
With
well.
her tears.
Yes.
With her tears.
And the governor of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey, and the mayor of Boston, and other assorted Democrats. And that's the key. Did you notice anything in particular that they all had in common on that platform?
Well, like I said, I was staying a bit of a distance from where they were standing.
But it's a D word. They're all Democrats.
Yes, that's
They were all
correct.
There was not a Republican to be found among them. Now, we had asked for and pressed for them to have a Republican on stage, and at which point they reminded me that there were no Republican members of the Massachusetts congressional delegation, and I understand that, nor are there Republicans on any statewide level, and I understand that as well. But if this is a so-called unity rally, you can't have all Democrats all the time. Now, for example, their speeches were good, with the exception of Ed Markey, and I do, and believe me, I don't often say this, but I do commend Congressman Auchincloss for his very pro-Israel speech, and it was very good. He sounded like a Republican, although he's not. But also, what happened was they really, it was almost like they got their talking points from the White House, and nobody really wanted to mention the, shall we say, the quote elephant in the room, and that is Iran. None of them made mention of Iran and Iran's support of Hamas and Iran's direction of the Hamas terror war against Israel. And I found that very disappointed. Did you notice that as well?
Yes, that is extremely disappointing. Iran has been funding Hamas. And when Donald Trump was president, he put sanctions on Iran. Iran's oil revenues were way down. But when Joe Biden came in, he lifted the sanctions or he loosened them. And Iran's oil revenues have gone up 10 times to $80 billion. That enabled Iran to foment all this nasty activity supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and trying to develop a nuclear bomb, which is very dangerous.
And you know, the problem is, again, we're trying as best as possible to be a united front, a united country for Israel and against the Hamas terrorists. And we do commend, surprisingly, President Biden, Secretary Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin for their very pro-Israel remarks. However, and this is the big however, have you noticed in the last few days that, for example, suddenly Joe Biden is talking about, well, Israel shouldn't occupy all of Gaza after they defeat Hamas. And Anthony Blinken is hinting in the same direction. And so after the initial pro-Israel spurts from the administration, now suddenly they're starting to mitigate things, and this is what we anticipated would happen. And not only that, but while it is amazing that CNN and other news outlets, with the exception of NBC and MSNBC, have been pro-Israel, we also expect them to backpedal as the casualties in this terror war shift to Gaza and away from Israel. In other words, as Israel is winning the war, there'll be more casualties in Gaza. So then two things are going to happen, I think. And that is the Democrats will suddenly ask for, really, in addition to Ed Markey, suddenly ask for things to wind down and de-escalation, with their media supporters calling for the same. Do you see that as well?
I'm afraid to say that you are correct on that, Tom.
And I wish I weren't. But again, this is a prediction. Now, specifically as it applies to the Newton schools, we don't have the exact estimates anymore, But it's assumed that in the Newton Public Schools, as in the city at large, that there's a Jewish population here of about 40%, which would encapsulate the Newton Public Schools. And of course, this is going to affect the students in the school, not only the Jewish students, but all the other students as well, we would assume. But in particular, the Jewish students. And so the responses around the schools have been, I think that they while they haven't been as forthright and as, shall we say, and dare I say, the Biden administration, they've been trying to deal with this in a way that they're not used to. By that I mean, while they try to have a moral equivalency normally between Israel and the Palestinians, the only school that I've seen doing that is Newton North, where the principal sent out a notice talking about Israel and Palestine. Well, we know there's an Israel, and as far as we can see, there's not a Palestine. There are Palestinian terrorists who are trying to kill Jews in Israel. And the new superintendent, Nolan, sent out a notice. While it was interesting and it was good, it was kind of muted and quite frankly, it was kind of lame. And I wish that they had been more forceful and forthright.
When did this happen?
Well, this happened earlier in the week. And if you're not within the school system, and I get their notices because people send them to me, but more importantly, and you were at an event, which I wasn't at because I didn't know about this, you were at an event that was supposed to be, it was sponsored by the city at the War Memorial at City Hall, and it was supposed to be as people understood it, a rally for Israel against Hamas and against anti-Semitism in the United States. And could you tell us a bit about that, what you saw and what you didn't see, more importantly?
I thought there was going to be more like a somber time to remember what happened on October the 7th. However, most of the speakers there were more concerned about hate crimes in the local area and
Such
dealing
as?
with anti-Semitism and as well as the hate crimes against the LGBTQ community and the black community and the Latino community.
So, in other words, this was supposed to be a specific event for a specific ongoing incident in Israel, but they changed it into something more, or something that it wasn't supposed to be, with the groups that you're describing. And so you showed up and many other people showed up. The place was standing room only, anticipating that they would talk about their support for Israel in the war against Hamas. And suddenly they delve into these other issues, which really have nothing to do with why people are there, have nothing to do with what the event is supposed to be. And they talk about these hate crimes against groups without, did they show any statistics, by the way? Did they show any data? Did they mention
I don't
any data?
I don't remember the data that was shown.
Well, if they're talking about Newton, and they talk about, and they refer to hate crimes against the said groups, I'd like them to produce data, first of all. And they never seem to do that, because if they did that, then they would find that these so-called hate crimes are absolutely minimal, if non-existent. But still, you know, it's almost as if they can't help themselves by bringing in these other issues, which are non-issues, and instead of focusing on the real issue, which of course is the Hamas, the real hate crimes, which is the Hamas war against Israel. But not only that, but in Boston, in the Boston area, and also specifically in Greater Boston, where we had a great deal, not a great deal, but vociferous elements who were protesting against Israel, both in Cambridge and in Boston and elsewhere. Have you noticed that as well?
Yes, and there was an Accuracy in Media truck in Cambridge that had pictures of these demonstrators, probably to get information to the, I think he's a billionaire, Bill Ackman. Mm-hmm. He's a big billionaire. That this would damage these demonstrators' attempts at future employment.
I see. Yes, that's a very good idea. And, you know, it's interesting, but when they had this big rally in Cambridge, and we're trying to figure out, well, how many people from Newton were there? And we saw the tape of it. I personally didn't recognize anyone. We're trying to ask around to see if people did recognize him. And what we're looking for in particular is, were there any people from the Newton Public Schools in the staff? We don't know that, but we wouldn't be surprised if they were, given the bias among really a hardcore leftist cabal, shall we say, in the Newton schools, which is and has been continuously anti-Israel. But you know what we're seeing also, both locally and in the country at large, is really something that has been simmering and brewing out there for a long time, and that is anti-Israel and anti-Semitic hate. I mean, this is where the real hate lies. And we saw it in New York City, we saw it in Los Angeles with these Hamas leaning immigrants obviously from Arab countries who are here with their leftist students, American born and raised, who are here as well, protesting against Israel in the most, to borrow a term from the left, the most hateful manner. And when you see so many young people marching with these terror-leaning sympathizers, it's appalling. It's really appalling. Did you hear the comments by Alan Dershowitz?
No, I haven't in the last few days.
Well, let me just elaborate a bit. And Dershowitz, he's a Democrat, but he's one of the most wonderful Democrats I've ever met. I've met him over the years. We're at the White House Hanukkah party for 3 years, and he's a wonderful fellow. But that aside, he was extremely angry about what was happening in Cambridge, at Harvard in particular, but also New York City and Times Square when he saw it. And he related the fact that in 1939, there was a massive demonstration down Broadway in Times Square by the American-German Bund, which supported Nazi Germany at the time before the war. And these were people who were anti-Semitic, supported an anti-Semitic government, movement, Nazi Germany, and they marched right down Broadway in New York City, in Manhattan. And he was equating that to what was happening today, last Columbus Day to be exact, when you had thousands of Hamas supporters marching down Broadway to Times Square, supporting the present-day Nazis in Israel, which is Hamas. And it's mind-boggling to see them do that. And when they were confronted by reporters, not just from Fox, but NBC and elsewhere, about, well, how do you explain the fact that so many children and babies were killed, and what about the babies in Israel, the Jewish babies who were burned alive and who were beheaded? Then they said, that's propaganda. That didn't happen. That is a fabrication of the Israeli media and the Israeli government. But these things did happen. Did you see have you seen the tape or the pictures?
Somebody held a Nazi swastika.
And somebody held a Nazi swastika.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the most painful things has been the photographs of and the tapes of the babies who were killed, mutilated, and burned alive. And I've seen them. And I don't recommend people to see them because they're really traumatic and they'll stay with you for a while. Once you get these images in your mind, you can't get them out. But all I could think to myself after seeing them was, by coincidence, I happened to watch, for better or worse, a 4-part series on the Einsatzgruppen, which were the first Nazi killers in Eastern Europe before the gas chambers came into being. And they were units who rounded up the Jews in Eastern Europe, in the old Soviet Union, put them into pits and killed them, and rounded up children and killed them on the spot, and just murdered them indiscriminately. And so what they did during the Nazi era in the 1940s and World War II is what is happening now in Israel by Hamas. And here we are so many years later, so many decades later, and it's still going on. It's the head of not so much anti-Semitism, but Jew hatred and murder has raised its head again in the spirit, not in the spirit, I should say, but in the form of Hamas, the modern-day Nazis.
It's in the Hamas charter, Tom. Anybody out there reads the Hamas charter, they will see that is nothing short of the destruction of the state of Israel. You can read maybe 32 articles of the Hamas Charter. The Hamas Charter, the Palestinian Liberation Organization Charter, the Islamic Jihad Charter. They're all out for the destruction of the state of Israel.
But and what was apparent was, for example, in Israel now, from what I understand, and I have in-laws in Israel who I assume by now have been deployed, but everyone in Israel is traumatized because they're getting attacked from the south, from the north, and Israel is united, whether you're in the far left parties, you're for the far right parties, communists, ultra-religious, whatever, they're all united. And one thing in particular was when there was basically some type of rave rock concert, I don't know the difference, near the Gaza border, of about 3,000 young Israelis who were there for a weekend for music. And the terrorists came in with hang gliders of all things, and they landed, and with the machine guns, and they just started spraying everyone with guns, trying to kill as many as possible, all young Israelis. And they managed to kill, I believe the number is 260 or 270, and kidnapped many more and brought them back into Gaza. And again, these were just young people who were attending a concert. They were civilians, and they weren't bothering anyone, and suddenly they were just set upon. Now, Black Lives Matter, which is in and of itself is an anti-Israel, if not anti-Semitic organization in America, they came out with from Chicago, one of the headquarters in Chicago, you've seen it, we've all seen it, a picture of a hang glider with a Hamas terrorist flying into Israel to kill the Jews. Yep. And this is an organization which regretfully has, shall we say, if not gotten support among the Newton Public School staff, they've been, shall we say, not dismissing them or not condemning them as they should. And this is really the watershed where they need to do that, but nobody has done that yet. And they'll continue to support such a nefarious organization like that. Again, this is the Black Lives Matter organization. Have you seen that as well?
All I know is that there are still many homes that have Black Lives Matter signs in their front lawns.
Yeah, and
this is a disgrace.
It's really pathetic, especially now that we see them in their true light, what they're all about and who they're siding with. Because, this is akin to when the September 11, 2001 terrorist bombings happened, and George W. Bush said, well, you're either with us or against us. And this is really the watershed moment. You're either with Israel or you're with the other side. It's like World War II. You're either with the Allies or you're with the Nazis. You're either with the Jewish victims or you're with the Hamas aggressors. There's really there's no middle ground here at all, none whatsoever.
Well, on September 11, 2001, after the planes crashed into the World Trade Center, they were celebrating, handing out little candies in Gaza City. They were having a ball of a time.
That's right.
It was incredible.
Well, Alan, I think that really this is a message that needs to be conveyed to young people, that there's good and evil in the world. And you and I both knew mentor and friend, dear friend Stephen Ross, who's the founder of the New England Holocaust Memorial. And that's what he used to say, because he was a victim of it in the Holocaust. And he understood the moral clarity of it. And honestly, at least he's not here to see what has become, because he would recognize everything that Hamas is doing. He would recognize it from his childhood as a Jewish captive of the Nazis during World War II, because that is what Hamas is doing. But the difference, of course, is now that Israel has a mighty army, a mighty air force, and they're going to eliminate Hamas really, literally forever. But the problem is, or the dilemma will occur when, as George W. Bush says, we will not only attack and destroy Al-Qaeda, but we will go after those countries which harbor and support them. That was said in 2001. Now today, I wish Joe Biden would say pretty much the same thing, but he won't, pertaining to Hamas, because he can't. because he's shifted the U.S. Foreign policy to giving too much leverage to Iran. But I believe what's going to happen is that Israel, once they neutralize Hamas in the Gaza Strip, then they will have to go after the source of Hamas, which of course is Iran. And I hope they do it. I really do, because Iran has to be dealt with sooner or later, and that will mean massive air attacks from Israel against Iran. But conveniently, there are also two major aircraft carrier groups off the coast of Israel, with the with the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford and the Eisenhower, and those have 20 ships each. And so I don't want to say my fear, but my anticipation is that they could join in the attack on Hamas, on not Iran also, if it comes to that, maybe. And then what does Russia do? What does China do? This could lead to a wider war. This could be a replication of World War I.
Well, President Biden, he could reimpose the sanctions on Iran. I had Larry Kudlow on Fox Business this afternoon, and he says that we can just put blatant sanctions on Iran.
Yes.
That's what America can do.
He could, and they could have a blockade of Iran, but at this point, it's unlikely that they'll do it, because he's too far down the road with reinvigorating Iran, when the previous administration, the Trump administration, did the exact opposite. And had a Republican been in the White House right now, like Trump, then you would see, I think that you would have seen by now, a regime change in Iran. And really, that's all it takes for the mullahs to be ousted and Iran to return to morph into, shall we say, maybe the beginnings of a democratic society within the country. We don't know. In other words, you shouldn't have to attack Iran. The idea is to nullify, to get rid of the government, to regime change. But, you know, again, I get back to the moral clarity which has to be specified to the young people of this city and of this state and country. Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? And there's no gray area in between. And my fear is, as the casualties mount in Gaza, you may see a shift in public opinion, so to speak.
Because Hamas puts their civilians in harm's way.
They certainly
as
do.
shields. And Israel drops leaflets warning the people of Gaza to evacuate as soon as possible. So there is a difference in the moral mindset there.
There certainly is, and Israel is a just army, and they try to minimize civilian casualties as much as possible. But the point is, in a war like this, you really can't. Alan, things go by fast on this show because we delve into very important issues, and 30 minutes is a quick time to have a show. We need an hour, if not 2 hours. But we talked about this issue, and we needed to air this issue, and we actually postponed another important issue, which was the voter ID petition. But nevertheless, this is important for us to talk about right now at this point in time. And we wish the people of Israel the best. As they say in Hebrew, Am Israel Chai, the United States is with you. The American people are with you. And hopefully, we know things will get worse before they get better, but Israel will see the light at the end of the tunnel and will prevail in the end. Thank you again, Alan, for being here.
Thank you.